Thank you for showing up today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, some information probably between residential and commercial. Some of it you may already know, the different kind of asset classes you can work with, and then some tools. And then, if you want to have some conversation about transition process and some recommendations, I'm always happy to have a conversation. And if you want to talk more after this, I'm always open to do that too. So I started in real estate, commercial real estate investing in 2011. The time I was in local government, so I spent 15 years in that career and then moved over to residential real estate in 2017 and then moved to commercial in 2020, in March of 2020. So COVID was fun. And then my business partner and I opened a brokerage, a commercial real estate office in Vancouver in, let's see, February of 2023. I always have to think about that because it will be 2 years here in February. And then year to date, we've sold and leased over 400,000 square feet. So the market's been good for us, kind of despite what's been going on in the residential market. And so as part of our brokerage, we just wanted to share a little bit about what our values are in terms of, being more of a collaborative environment than maybe some other offices, in all industries. I think collaboration is important, and that's something that we definitely value because it's the only way we're all going to learn and get better. And the great thing about this industry, no matter what side you're on, is you're learning something new every day. So trying to stay on top of that's really important. And then, of course, being communicative and doing things like that that are very similar on both sides of the business. But so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, people often ask me, like, why did I leave residential real estate and what is the difference between commercial and residential? And, I would say that for me, one of the biggest drivers was I knew I had a bit much more of a business that wanted to deal and interact with people that were on the business side. And I also didn't want to always be on call for nights and weekends. I wanted to be able to have a little bit more structure in my life. And so I think that is something that really kind of called to me. But in commercial, you have a lot more variety. Not only is every transaction different in how we structure it, no two transactions are the same. Yes, we use a form, but it's not as rote as residential. We also have different ways of making money, whether that's, leases, purchases, sales, consulting, where again, since we're not in a market where we would get paid for helping somebody lease an apartment, you're pretty limited in terms of how you can go make money and subject to a lot of, things that we have no control over, like interest rates and what's happening in the economy, where I have been able to pivot with what has happened in the last couple of years. And so most of my clients right now are owner users and not investors because with interest rates the way they are, I'm still able to work and make money. And not that residential agents aren't, but I just felt like there was a lot more opportunity for me to modify my business based on what was going on in the economy. And then, even though in residential you can make your money a lot faster. I mean, they always say that 30 days you can get paid, but the reality of it is we know by the time you're getting a lead and nurturing it, of course it takes longer. But even for us, when we get under contract, we have a closing next year that will have been under contract for 3 years. So, that is one of the downsides is there's not really any quick money. Things do take time. So that ramp up period can be a little tough, just because you're waiting so long to make any money. But once you get going and you kind of have that pipeline, just like with residential, you're nurturing people for maybe months, if not years, till they decide to buy or sell. And so once you get that going, then there's a little bit more freedom there. So as I mentioned, I felt like with commercial, I just have a lot more opportunities to make money. I can focus on tenant representation or working with building owners and representing them on their leases, the purchase and sales. And then, just different ways of navigating the business that just for me gives me a lot more opportunity than I felt like with residential. It's like, well, I can only make money in two ways unless I want to open a property management arm. So when it comes to commercial real estate, you just have more options. You can choose to focus on any of these asset classes, or you can, choose to be more agnostic to your industry type, which is the business model that I currently have. But, when it comes to focusing, you really can decide what you enjoy doing, whether you want to work with retail, multifamily, different types of RV properties, whether it's storage or, the mobile home parks, office hospitality, which is like golf courses, restaurants, hotels, healthcare, land. I mean, really, the world is your oyster in terms of all the different ways that you can focus on making money. We also do business sales if it includes the real property. If it doesn't, we refer that out to a business broker. But again, just more opportunities to go out there and find different clients that are in these different asset classes that for me, it just made me feel a lot more comfortable that I could have a diverse income stream. So, the perception out there is that we have, higher commission checks and lower commission splits, which is typically true unless you're going to do commercial at a residential shop, where your splits maybe are a little different, or you have a, set annual cap, and then, you're taking more of your checks. But if you're hanging your license at a traditional commercial firm, you are going to have higher commission splits. Most of the time, they're going to start at 50-50, and then depend on your production, they will change, every year, or reset every year. And there is some truth that there's higher commission checks, but I've also, spent 3 years listing something and made $500. So that was a learning opportunity. As you're trying to figure out like, oh, okay, I never would have thought that this person would have, only signed a 1-year lease just so that they could get out of paying me. And so sometimes those are things that you just learn while you're doing the business, just like on the residential side, you're like, oh, I won't do that again. So there are some times that the checks are higher, but the downside can be that, the residential or the commercial firms are going to take higher splits, but they are going to cover your expenses, which our expenses are often a little bit higher than on the residential side, in particular with CoStar and LoopNet and some of the tools that we use. So is there anything that comes to mind when you think of commercial real estate, like one word that might just pop into your mind, Ken?
Long lease.
Long lease. Yeah, definitely.
Only because in previous life I was in healthcare and I had to do those things. I had
Okay.
to negotiate those contracts.
So you were like doing 10, 15-year leases.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And like
And
negotiating like all the carpeting, paint, and all that
and
other
tenant
stuff and
improvements.
price per square foot. Yeah. You have to
Yeah.
stay
So you were
this
putting a
long to
lot of
get that.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Mhm.
were putting a lot of money into the space.
Mhm.
Yeah. So those would be great leases if that's a world that you decided you wanted to get back into on the broker side to get into, because of course, it'll take a long time to negotiate those. But the more leases are generally based on, as the square foot and then the lease rate and then the term. And so it's like, well, the longer the term, the more money you can make maybe on the broker side. So those are great clients to have versus somebody that's a small business and maybe only looking for a 2-year lease. So yeah, that definitely is in alignment with that. So some of the things that when I first wanted to get into commercial real estate, I was trying to do it on my own at a residential shop. And one of my biggest challenges was using CoStar, which is kind of like the system that we use. It's, publicly traded company. They own LoopNet. I think they own homes.com and apartments.com and other stuff that I think they're making more of a foray into the residential world. But really, without CoStar in this market, it is really hard to do business and look at commercial analytics. How are you going to price something on a lease or on a sale? Because very, very few commercial brokers use the MLS. We do because if I have a buyer, I do know that residential agents will list some commercial property, and it's in my client's best interest to try to find something that maybe not on either of those. And so I personally do, use the MLS, but, most commercial brokers are only navigating CoStar, and not everything, even though CoStar owns LoopNet, is on LoopNet because we also have to pay to put our listings on LoopNet. So, some brokers are not paying to put their things out there. And so, it can get kind of expensive. And then, using the commercial forms, we don't, unless I'm working with a residential agent that's bringing us a commercial buyer, I'm not familiar with the OREF and OREA commercial forms. That's just, we usually use a commercial broker form. And then, a lot of folks are in the industry, become certified commercial investment managers. If you come to our office, we require that within the first 2 years to take CCIM 101. There, is a discount if you're an NAR member, but it's at least kind of the basics of commercial, pricing and understanding the numbers in commercial real estate. The designation, I think probably if you take all the classes, is about $10,000. And then of course maintaining that designation. And then having a CRM, and then of course prospecting, it doesn't matter what side of the business you're on. I think that's super important. So Um, so let's see. So I often get asked what the biggest difference is between residential and commercial real estate, because the barrier to entry is a little bit difficult, especially in terms of the time to get paid. And if you don't have money saved or a second income, it could be feel really challenging, because I tell people you probably need 12 to 24 months of expenses saved, because it can take a long time to get paid, and those big checks, unless you're really, really lucky, don't always show up right away. And so what I tell people is the knowledge in the business. A good residential agent is totally worth every dime that you pay, because of their knowledge and their, vendor contacts and all of that. And the same goes for commercial real estate. I have people call and ask me questions. I'm happy to like give them a couple of answers and guide them through the process. But at some point I had a lady call me. She was an admin assistant at a law firm, and we were friends. And finally I was like, why do you keep calling and asking me these questions? She's like, well, the law firm owner is trying to buy a building. And I'm like, well, are they working with a broker? Because all these questions are things that a broker should be telling them. And she's like, no, he's doing it on his own. And I was like, well, I'm done after the third question. I was like, I'm done sharing your knowledge. I cannot give it to you away for free. This is why people pay me and they hire me, because I know that I have the knowledge, I have access to the information, and this is my job. I can't just keep doing work for free or giving you the knowledge so that you can just kind of undercut. And it wasn't even about working with me; it's even working with another professional in the industry. And so the knowledge really comes with obviously doing the business, taking the classes, and staying on top of things. But as you know, probably from your getting licensed, neither of these the licensing in Oregon or Washington or probably any state doesn't really focus anything about commercial real estate. So you don't really learn anything. It's really, learning and earning at the same time. And I'm learning something new every day. I just realized yesterday I need a better way of tracking earnest money and when it's due, because we don't have the same dates in all of our contracts. And sometimes the earnest money is due right away. Sometimes it's due after they waive their contingencies. And so I'm like, oh, I learned my lesson. I need to be more on top of this, and I need a better system. So, always constantly trying to improve. So, a little bit of pitch about us is, why would somebody want to come and work at our offices? As I kind of talked a little bit about, is our focus is really on collaboration. Whether you want to be on a team or on your own. This industry, I think, is really known for the old guard is like, I have the information and I'm not going to share it with you. And, I just want to kind of do my own thing and keep my kingdom and my fiefdom. And that's not really the attitude I have. I think this industry, is big enough for anybody that wants to get into commercial real estate, or, even on the residential side. The pie is big enough for all of us if we want to work and go out there and get it. And then obviously training, I think ongoing learning the business, especially while you're trying to get going, is really important. And then our splits are different than other firms in terms of how we're trying to get people accelerated in the industry. And then, other national firms kind of have some restrictions on, what kind of business you're going to go chase, and, what kind of clients you're going to go after. And I remember being recruited by a big local firm, and they were like, well, you could only do retail tenant leasing in Vancouver. And I was like, but what happens if I have somebody who wants to buy an office building? And they're like, well, you have to go, and give that to Bob in our office who only does that. And I was like, well, that's like the hardest part of this business is prospecting. So if I have to give away 3/4 of my leads because that's not how I've been prospecting, it makes it kind of tough for me to make a living. And so we don't restrict what kind of asset class or how you want to get started in the business. But if you want to hang your license, and I would say that even this is probably true of most other firms, is really I have 6 to 12 months, but depending on what your savings is like, I always just tell people, like, your first few checks might be a few $1,000s, and for people that's often not enough. So making sure you have enough money in the bank is really, really important. And obviously that's true for residential too. You gotta have enough money in the bank if you're going into it full time to be moving forward. And then, sitting down with my business partner, Lyle, and I doing a sales assessment. And then within the first 2 years is taking that CCIM 101 class just so you can get some basics. And then, of course, having a prospecting plan is really, really important. You can't just show up and be like, hey, I'm here. I'm in the commercial side. You have to find a way to go get some business, which we're happy to help folks with. So that is kind of the down and dirty of getting into commercial real estate.
No, I appreciate that. Is
Yeah.
there any way this recording can't be saved if it's just, I mean, shared if it's just you and I? I don't
Yeah,
want to like
I
blow my
am going
cover.
to, yes, I'm gonna follow up with everybody that registered for the class. I'm kind of thinking something happened that the link reminder didn't go out, which is why, because I had 45 people registered as of yesterday. So I was
Okay.
expecting at least half of those people to show up. So I'm kind of thinking I had a glitch on my end.